Good afternoon. Our group will be discussing how to ethically collaborate with other professionals across different disciplines when working in the field of applied behavior analysis. Although we come from various backgrounds, we all agree that it is imperative to work with other professionals in order to better serve our clients. I'm Bryn Nicholas. I've been in the field of ABA for 10 years now, mostly working in the clinical setting. I've been fortunate enough to learn from and work with other professionals such as speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, pediatricians, school counselors, and teachers. I strongly believe that collaboration is key to effective treatment for individuals with autism.
Hi, my name is Yvonne Smith, and I have been in the education field for 15 years, 14 of them as a special education teacher in a private school for students who have multiple disabilities. Over the last year or so, I have stepped out of that full-time classroom role into the role of an ABA instructor as I complete my supervision hours as well as the coursework required to sit for my BCBA examination. Over that time period, I have collaborated with various professionals and paraprofessionals throughout my career.
Hi everyone, my name is Dakota Turner. I've been working in the field of ABA for about 2 years now. I work mostly in a school setting, and being in this field, I believe it's really important to be able to collaborate with other professionals in order for us to be successful as behavioral analysts. Fortunately, I have already had several opportunities to do so, to experience collaborating with other professionals throughout my work.
Hi, my name's Jessica McEwen. I've been in the field of ABA for about 12 years now. I strongly believe that anyone that could benefit from ABA should have the ability to access those services in some capacity. And I think the best way to accomplish that is by collaborating with other professionals across different settings.
Hi, my name is Kelly Beechler, and I've just recently started in the field of ABA. I've been a behavior therapist for about 9 months now. I work in a clinic setting with children about 7 years and younger. I believe that ABA can be beneficial for people with autism, and I think that it should be accessible to as many as possible. I also believe that collaboration with other professionals is a very important aspect in implementing effective ABA services.
As behavior analysts, we have an ethical obligation to disseminate our services across different diversities and populations for children diagnosed with autism. A study by Burkett et al. In 2015 shows that families with different cultural backgrounds often have their children diagnosed with autism later in their lives, therefore seeking treatment later, if at all. Some cultures see disabilities as voodoo and may not seek out knowledge on the subject matter. Implementing ABA in schools can provide awareness and access to all families where they may not have been former opportunities. Additionally, it is our duty to collaborate with any stakeholders to ensure that our clients are able to generalize skills to the next environment after the clinical setting, or when appropriate, provide service in the natural environment, such as in the public or private schools, job placements, homes, etc. While our group strongly believes that the only way to improve on socially significant behaviors and provide the most effective services for our learners is through collaboration, there are many who doubt that collaboration can be effective and ethical for learners. We will discuss some of the main limitations in collaboration, specifically in regards to collaborating with school professionals. We will also provide information gathered from research and our experience in the field on how effective collaboration can ethically be achieved. The CDC reported in 2020 that 1 in 54 children are diagnosed with autism. 1 in 6 children between the ages of 3 and 17 have been diagnosed with some type of developmental disability, including autism. While the increasing number of children diagnosed with autism each year, a large amount of collaboration will be needed in the academic setting to support these individuals diagnosed. Based on the research, our personal experiences with collaborating with other professionals, and our ethical obligations to our learners, we believe that even a little bit of ABA is better than no ABA. We will now discuss some challenges when collaborating with other professionals in the school, addressing the cost, the training, and the restrictive procedures.
So starting off with cost. Applied behavior analysis, like most things, costs money. By the year 2025, costs are expected to increase. The projected annual cost is expected to increase from about 268 billion to 461 billion. However, some research shows that getting started early in early intervention can potentially save money in the long run. But on the other hand, early intervention plans come with an expensive cost, therefore may not be accessible for all families. There have been studies conducted that provide support for both of these sides. Kelly and Jessica will now discuss the pros and cons of the cost of ABA while providing research to support their side.
So the cost of living with autism is quite high. There was one study done by Rogue and Jansen in 2019 that examined lifetime costs associated with supporting a person with autism. They focused on categories such as medical and healthcare related service costs, therapeutic costs, special education costs, costs of production loss for adults with ASD, costs of informal care and loss of productivity for family and caregivers, costs of accommodations, respite care, and out-of-pocket expenses. They estimated that the lifetime cost of one person with autism in the US is greater than 2.4 million. The study found that the cost of early intervention programs for children with autism ranges from around 40,000 to 60,000 a year. There was another study done by Chatterjee et al. In 2015 that used data from the 2005 to 2006 and 2009 to 2010 waves of the National Survey of Privately Insured Children with Special Healthcare Needs, and they look at the mandate that went into effect for 37 states in which healthcare providers, such as private insurances, were required to cover autism services in their plans. The study showed that 36% of families said that coverage is never or only sometimes reasonable, and 26% of families stated that there are financial problems due to child's healthcare costs.
I agree that it's expensive. That's not in question, but I also believe that it's a little short-sighted to focus just on those upfront costs, given the available research into the cost savings of early intervention. So a study by Chesson et al. In 2007 conducted in the state of Texas compared the cost of 3 years of early intensive behavioral intervention, specifically in the form of discrete child training, with the cost of 18 years of special education. By reducing the need for special education and more intensive special education, the state of Texas could have saved over $200,000 over the course of that 18 years. Given the prevalence of autism and the rising prevalence of autism, that would be a significant savings, not only to schools, but to local education agencies and to society as a whole. The Texas study was backed up by an earlier study by Jacobson et al. Published in Behavioral Interventions in 1998, which predicted similar cost savings with implementation of early intensive behavioral intervention. It also posits that the upfront costs, which are short-sighted given the research stated, are justified due to the lack of alternative effective treatments for autism. I like this point, especially given that it runs parallel to our ethics code, specifically code 2.09, that states that our clients have a right to effective intervention. Behavior analysts always have the obligation to advocate for and educate the client about scientifically supported, most effective treatment procedures, and effective treatment procedures have been validated as having both long-term and short-term benefits to clients and society.
I understand what you're saying, but school budgets are already stretched too thin, and they're cut all the time. Although early intervention can save money in the long run, it still comes with a pretty high cost. This high cost, even with early intervention, may not be accessible for all families. One study by Burkett et al. 2015 examined multiple studies that showed that African American children were more often diagnosed later, misdiagnosed, and diagnosed with more severity compared to their Caucasian peers. This can also pertain to people with autism of other cultures. Here's a graph representing the statistics of autism prevalence by culture. With this, some families may not be provided the opportunity for services until later on in life, so the cost for these families enrolling in services becomes higher because services will likely be used for longer and they may need to use more intense services. In some, due to the high cost of ABA, it's not accessible for everyone.
But I would argue that that's even more reason to bring ABA into the schools. If we bring ABA into the schools, we're going to reach more children and we're going to reach them at an earlier age. hopefully thereby reducing the need for more intensive services later in their lives and again, saving money. The IDEA outlined the right to a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, for all children ages 3 to 21 who qualify. The idea of FAPE was initially fairly vague until Andrew F. v. Douglas County School District attempted to clarify the provisions. The court held that to meet its substantive obligation under the IDEA, a school must offer a child an IEP reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of that child's circumstances. Furthermore, a 2002 article published in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders by Mandlowitz posits that by offering an eclectic treatment package in the special education program, including ABA, schools can avoid costly litigation proceedings. The author found that the cause of litigation, other than blatant violations of FAPE and IDEA, were often a lack of trust between the parents and outside agencies in the schools. So to avoid litigation and thereby save money, schools need to review their current program offerings and stop being resistant to looking beyond traditional methodologies. Local schools are going to have more parent cooperation if ABA and other methodologies are considered viable program components.
So Jessica and Kelly both brought up very good supporting points for their arguments. The cost of ABA is very expensive and is only going to get more expensive over the next decade. So maybe early intervention would be the best way to save money. But in this case, it's important to make sure that people of all backgrounds are able to benefit. So now that we've talked about the pros and cons of cost, we're going to talk about adequate training for behavioral analysts.
Thanks, Dakota. A behavior treatment package is only as good as those who implement it. The best plan is useless without trained individuals to carry out the plan and skilled behavior analysts to analyze the data and make the necessary changes. A behavior analyst overseeing learners in a school environment has to be able to effectively train the paraprofessionals who will be implementing the plan. She must also be able to effectively communicate and collaborate with other professionals within the school environment. This would include teachers, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, among many others. The Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavior Analysts provides guidance for behavior analysts who must decide if they can effectively and ethically provide services in the school environment. First and foremost, Code 2.09 outlines our clients' rights to effective treatment. That includes advocating for the appropriate amount of supervision, which would include staff training. Code 2.03b calls on behavior analysts to collaborate with other professionals to appropriately and effectively serve their clients. Brennan Yvonne will now discuss how to facilitate effective training and collaboration, and also the barriers to doing it effectively and ethically.
So if ABA is to be brought into the public school setting, it will need to be implemented in a systematic way. There are several barriers to effective collaboration and training of school staff. For instance, according to Kelly and Tinkani in 2013, 302 behavioral professionals were surveyed, but only about 60% of those participants had taken any training or classes that included the word collaboration in the title or the description. However, 95% of them worked with individuals with autism spectrum disorder. When working in a school setting with individuals with autism, you are likely working with a whole team of other professionals and paraprofessionals. However, they had not received the necessary training in what real collaboration looks like. According to Bradhead, collaboration is engaging in professional activities with another autism or related service provider that would not have been achieved in isolation. It needs to be our goal to work effectively with others, but there needs to be effective training in what effective collaboration really looks like. The result is changes in the behavior of the other professionals and paraprofessionals with respect to their service delivery.
Yvonne brings up valid points when providing services in the school setting, that the behavior analyst does need to be collaborative and respectful to all the disciplines that she works with when providing services. There are many ways we can do this ethically while remaining scientific in nature, though, and in the best interest of our clients. The BACB Ethics Code 2.03b and 2.09 states that behavior analysts have an ethical obligation to provide effective treatment to their clients and, when appropriate, to cooperate with other professionals in the best interest of the client. In order to do so, the behavior analyst must first develop a collaborative relationship with other professionals, though. In the third edition of The Ethics of Behavior Analysts by Bailey and Birch, they provide input onto how to develop a strong relationship with other professionals. Bailey and Birch state, before we can assume those from other persuasions will cooperate with us, it is necessary to develop rapport and let them know that you respect their point of view. Additionally, they state that the behavior analyst must be a good listener, provide reinforcement to professionals, and support ideas that are compatible with ABA principles. By having a strong collaborative relationship, the behavior analyst will be ready to present a proposed intervention when necessary and when working with other professionals. Additionally, as Yvonne stated, while many professionals feel that we don't know how to collaborate with other disciplines, it is our ethical obligation to provide effective services to our clients and whenever treatment is most appropriate.
That's a good point. So how do you think we should go about doing this?
Well, if you look at the research for providing behavior consultation in the academic setting, studies have been effective in identifying successful training models, such as using problem-solving approach, conjoint behavioral consultation, and then most recently, behavior skills training models. Sheridan et al. In 1996 conducted a literature review on various behavior consultation models in the academic setting. And they found many positive results, with the most significant of them were that the client's behavior was improved by 48%, academic success was improved by 33%, and then 89% of professionals reported that the behavior consultation produced an overall change in the positive direction for the academic environment. The study demonstrated that the behavior analyst can be effective in producing successful results when collaborating in the academic environment. One successful consultation model was by Bergen and Crotchwell in 1990. They developed a scientific model based on problem solving that is outlined in 4 stages. This problem solving consultation has produced positive results in the academic setting. In the 4-stage process, the collaborative team builds a relationship and then identifies the problem. They conduct an analysis on the identified problem with various assessments. They implement the treatment plan, including training the consultants. And finally, they conduct a treatment evaluation on the effectiveness of that intervention. They do this all as a team. This process produced consistent and desirable results in regards to client achievement and social behavior in the academic setting that is still utilized today. Another treatment model that has had success when working with the schools is the conjoint behavioral consultation approach by Sheridan et al. In 1994. Galloway and Sheridan investigated the effects of collaborative problem-solving approach and found that using behavior consultation to facilitate parent-teacher communication increased treatment integrity, produced maintenance of gains, and showed greater consumer acceptability. Overall, establishing a collaborative relationship is essential when providing training with other professionals, and certain methods have been successful at producing a positive results with our clients, along with creating a professional and respectful relationship.
Fair point. Another barrier, though, is the sheer number of cases that may need behavior analyst oversight in a public school. Ethics Code 4.0 states that behavior analysts are responsible for all aspects of the behavior change program, from conceptualization to implementation and then ultimately discontinuation. So if a team or individuals on a team are not implementing treatment with integrity and drifting from the written treatment, this could place that behavior analyst in an unfortunate position and compromise the prescribed treatment. Additionally, a behavior analyst needs to ensure follow-up with frequent integrity checks. Code 5.03 addresses this as well with supervisory delegation. A states that behavior analysts delegate to their supervisees only those responsibilities that such persons can reasonably be expected to perform competently, ethically, and definitely safely. B states if a supervisee does not have the skills necessary to perform these competently, ethically, and safely, Behavior analysts need to provide conditions for the acquisition of those exact skills. So the behavior analyst really does need to be on site, observing and offering feedback and ensuring treatment integrity as often as they possibly can be.
There's no doubt that training other professionals can be rigorous, and developing a method for accurate data collection can be a barrier when providing services in the academic setting. But it is our job as behavior analysts to find the most effective ways to provide training, accurate data collection, and ways to support others so that our clients have the most effective treatment possible when working with other professionals. I refer back to the BACB Ethical and Compliance Codes for Behavior Analysts. Code 2.09a states that our clients have the right to effective treatment, and it is our obligation to advocate and educate for the most effective treatment for our clients. Additionally, Ethics Code 6.02 states that it is our duty to promote behavior analysis through presentations, discussions, and trainings to the public. And then Ethics Code 7.0 states that we have a responsibility to our colleagues within other professions to make them aware of our ethical obligations. Developing procedures that will be implemented with fidelity and that will be maintained can be time-consuming, but it's important to remember the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis originally presented in 1968 by Bear, Wolf, and Risley when developing interventions for our learners. They must be technological. Interventions should be described well enough that others can implement them. Additionally, interventions should be generative, meaning intervention should continue after treatment ends and generalize to other areas of the client's life. As behavior analysts, we can achieve this by developing task analysis for others to follow, in addition to behavior intervention plans. We can create data collection that is more suitable for the home and the school environment. So for example, interval recording, using stop-start watches, frequency with clickers, timetables, charts. Additionally, research has shown that the use of video modeling has been highly effective in training others in the academic setting. McCulloch et al. In 2013 conducted a study showing that online training videos could be an effective way to train a large group of paraprofessionals, specifically in the context of man training for this study. Results show that correct implementation increased with the maintenance of skills, along with continued increase in the students' spontaneous manding behaviors. Adopting a behavior skills treatment, such as behavior skills treatment, BST model, along with video modeling, can be an effective way to train and maintain interventions in the academic setting, especially when training paraprofessionals. 2 key features of the BST are using performance and competency-based training components, which can be time-consuming, but has been highly effective. So in 2013, Parsons and Rolson conducted research outlining a more effective and efficient way to train implementing BST with a pyramidal training or peer training across multiple human services with individuals with autism. Through implementing BST and pyramidal training, staff was able to increase training success on the targeted skill to an average of 90% accuracy. In addition, 7 out of 9 participants were able to train other staff with those skills with 100% proficiency. The other 2 staff members were able to do that at 88% accuracy. So this is really, really efficient data that shows us we can do this. Many schools and clinics have implemented the BST training model when training multiple employees in behavior reduction procedures, including Yvonne's school, Tradewinds Education Center, which has recently trained the staff on Hanley's skills-based treatment using behavior skills training procedures.
As Yvonne described, there are definitely some barriers to overcome as it relates to providing adequate training and supervision of ABA programs in the school. We must overcome our lack of training and providing effective collaboration with other professionals, and we must find ways to provide better training to the individuals who are implementing our recommendations. As Bryn illustrated, however, behavior analysts are especially well suited to meet these challenges. We know how to build rapport with others. We know how to use reinforcement to increase the behaviors we wish to see, and we know how to use technology to our advantage. Our ethics obligate us to collaborate in order to provide our clients with the best treatment outcomes, and our science tells us how to do it. Effective training is probably the most important in our next topic, restrictive interventions.
Restrictive procedures are sometimes implemented in ABA and come with pros and cons. As behavior analyst, BACB Ethics Code 4.08a states that we have a duty to use reinforcement rather than punishment whenever possible. However, there may be some cases in which restrictive procedures such as restraints may be necessary to implement into a client's program. That is, if there is severe risk to the client or others in the environment. However, if this isn't done properly, it can come with high risks. Dakota and Yvonne will highlight these pros and cons of using restrictive procedures in ABA.
I'll be speaking on the pro side of restrictive procedures because I believe they are a need in our field of work. Behavior analysts never want to use restraints or seclusion unless they absolutely need to. However, sometimes it is appropriate to use these procedures. One reason I believe that using the restrictive procedures could be beneficial are in times of escalated aggression or escalated self-interest behavior. A study conducted by McTiernan, Leader, Healy, and Mannion in 2011 in an analysis of risk factors, it concluded that out of 174 children with autism, that 93.7% had challenging behaviors. And out of that 93.7%, 56.3% had aggressive behaviors and 48.9% had self-injurious behaviors, which means that almost half of the 174 children with autism could harm themselves. And so this is times that I think that restraint and seclusion would be appropriate.
Okay, so let's talk about restraints. I think we should focus on the physical restraint for the purposes of our discussion today. So what is a physical restraint or intervention? Well, it is when a caregiver or a classroom staff member uses their own body to restrain the movements of an individual. According to the SPCE curriculum taught in many agencies in New York State, restraint can take many forms. It is most often when a caregiver uses their own hands to limit the movement of the client or student as a reaction to the student's dangerous behavior. It may be in the form of a standing wrap up, a seated wrap, a one-person side control, a two-person supine, or even a three-person supine. And it should be noted that this curriculum actually is taught over a 3-day time span, and that there is a written test and a skills performance component to the assessment prior to approval to utilize these techniques. This class, the SPCE class, is taught to caregivers during their orientation at the beginning of their jobs. So why are so many resources used to teach physical interventions? Well, because according to their article, Tilley and Spreet in 2009, it places the number of injuries at 1 out of every 3 restraints.
You bring up some good points, Yvonne. So I understand why you feel that way. However, as a behavior analyst, we never want to do harm to a client, but we also never want our staff or other students to be harmed. I believe that restraints and seclusion could be used appropriately to help clients and staff reach success together. And this is supported by Ballmer et al. In 2011 by saying, when used in the context of behavior intervention plans, restraint in some cases serves both as a protective and therapeutic function. Behavior intervention plans are created by the BCBA, teachers, and the clients. So all behavior intervention plans are thoroughly discussed between all the people who are creating them. To ensure that the behavior analyst has been thorough, they will check to make sure they're complying with all ethical codes. So talking about ethical codes, let's look at 4.02, involving clients in planning and consent. So in the BACB ethics code, it states, behavior analysts involve the client in planning and consent for behavior intervention programs. Complying with this code ensures that restrictive procedures that are implemented are not without the consent of the parents or the clients. Therefore, if a restraint and seclusion is used as a therapeutic function, then the client and staff can both benefit from these restrictive procedures.
Okay, I see what you're saying, Dakota. The maximum time limit, though, for a restraint is 20 minutes, according to that SPCE curriculum. And that really does seem like a long time. Friedman and Crabb in 2018 point out the psychological toll that performing restraints has on the staff members that have to perform them. They iterated feelings of guilt and self-condemnation when implementing these physical measures. I think it's important here to look at the difference between a planned and an unplanned restraint. According to Matson and Boyd-Joly in 2009, a planned restraint typically involves a treatment plan which delineates specific procedures or techniques that are employed when an individual engages in maladaptive behavior. Ideally, the caregivers have been thoroughly trained on the plan, are fluent with the techniques, and are aware of those specific time limits, and also restraint criteria. So unless all of these, the treatment plan, the specific procedures, thorough training, fluency, and time limits are in place, there actually is a greater potential for things to go wrong. The other type of restraint that may take place is one that is unplanned. Unplanned restraints are those techniques which take place during a situation, sort of a crisis situation, to address a behavior that may cause harm to the individual or to other people as well. These unplanned restraints are the most problematic and are likely to result in those injuries that I was talking about, to both the persons exhibiting the challenging behaviors and the persons implementing the restraint. These are those interventions that are sometimes called emergency interventions. Insofar as the student doesn't have a behavior plan, but is in need of extra physical support, and they might injure themselves or other people. And that could be imminent in those situations, those crisis situations.
I do understand where you're coming from, but as I was researching the use of restrictive procedures, I found a couple articles that showed how individuals who these restraints are used on and how they felt about it. So in one article by Jeanette Hagapiano and Bioli, they measured the individual's heart rate while they were before the restraint, while they were in the restraint, and then after the restraint. And what they found is that the individual's heart rate was actually at a rest rate while they were being restrained. So it showed that restraints don't always have a negative effect on the individuals they're used on. And that was conducted in 2011. So then 2 years later, in 2013, there was another study conducted that helps to support this by Marino and Mornin. And they stated that they looked at the overall experience of individuals who have been in these restraints. And some of the responses included that individuals felt like the restrictive procedures helped them to become calm in these escalated situations. So they had a positive outlook with these. And then as for the staff who are involved in implementing these procedures, we can look at Ethics Code 1.02, which states that behavior analysts only practice within their identified scope of competence. So I agree with restrictive procedures, but only if the individuals who are implementing them are properly trained and are competent to implement them. Behavior analysts who implement these procedures know what they're getting into when they sign up for the job. So, like I said earlier, we never want to have to hold a client down, but if it's the only way to protect the safety of another student, our staff members, or the individual themselves, then restrictive procedures should be used. And behavior analysts who do implement these procedures at the end of the day go through a debriefing so they can talk about any feelings, concerns, or questions that may have happened or may have arose during the implemented procedure.
Fair point, Dakota. I think it's important here to refer back to one of our other ethics codes. There is a responsibility on the part of the therapist or behavior analyst to start with the least restrictive procedures that are likely to be effective first, as stated in Code 4.09. And then in Code 4.08, A through D, we have our marching orders on this one. So A states behavior analysts recommend reinforcement rather than punishment whenever possible. B goes on to say, if punishment procedures are actually necessary, behavior analysts always include those reinforcement procedures for alternative behavior in a behavior change program. And then C says, before implementing punishment-based procedures, behavior analysts ensure that appropriate steps have been taken to implement reinforcement-based procedures unless the severity or dangerousness of the behavior necessitates immediate use of aversive. D finally says, behavior analysts ensure that aversive procedures are accompanied by an increased level of training, supervision, and definitely oversight. Behavior analysts must evaluate the effectiveness of aversive procedures in a timely manner and then modify the behavior change programs if it is ineffective. Behavior analysts always include a plan to discontinue the use of aversive procedures when they are no longer needed. Restrictive procedures, including physical restraints, should not be used unless there is imminent danger, and then the individuals applying them are well qualified and well supervised. These instances should be few and far between if the rest of the students' programming is well implemented with appropriate and effective communication training, skill development, appropriate and effective reinforcement, and environmental factors are taken into account as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Yvonne, that these instances should only be, few and far between. But as I've said, I believe that they are used in our field of work. But I agree that there are a lot of factors that come into play when, restrictive procedures are taken into consideration. For instance, you may ask, like, what kind of restraints would we use? I'm only suggesting that evidence-based restrictive procedures that offer comprehensive training should be used. And along with that, I believe only those who are qualified to implement these procedures should be implementing them. The only qualified individuals include those who are supervised by BCBA and who have trained and certified to implement these restraints. And then finally, if these restrictive procedures are used, they should be far and few in between, but they should be carefully and continuously monitored to determine if they are still effective and that they're being implemented correctly. As mentioned earlier, behavior analysts should only work within their scope of competence. We talked about that ethical code earlier, but let's also look at code 5.06, providing feedback of supervisees. This code basically states that behavior analysts provide feedback to help improve performance. This helps to ensure that all individuals implementing these procedures will have been thoroughly trained and supervised and given feedback to change any issues that may have came up during implementing these procedures.
So as we see, evidence-based restraints may need to be used in a client's program if it's necessary in order to protect the client and/or others. While there may be cases of restraints resulting in injury to the client, these restraints were most likely not implemented properly. The use of restraints can take a toll on staff members implementing them. As Yvonne stated, some may feel guilty for having to hold a client down and can ruminate on these feelings of guilt. However, with the study Dakota highlighted about heart rate and use of restraints, we see that heart rates are often lowered when restraints are being used. This shows that restraints can be effective for calming a client down. Restraints are used only when necessary to protect the client and others in the environment. These are some things I think that we should keep in mind when we may feel guilty for having to use restraints. Although restraints may be necessary when we have exhausted all reinforcement strategies and there is severe risk of harm to the client or others, we must and foremost ensure that we are properly trained to use them in the best ways and the right way so that we don't pose any harm to the client.
So based on FAPE, the BACB Code of Ethics, and the current research in the field of ABA, our group believes that behavior analysts have an ethical duty to collaborate with other professionals, especially stakeholders in public schools serving children with autism. The concern that came up while reviewing the research was not if collaboration can be done ethically, but if we don't try to disseminate our services and collaborate with other professionals, are we in breach of our ethical obligations as behavior analysts? The skyrocketing costs associated with the rise in prevalence of children diagnosed with autism is not in question. However, who should bear the brunt of this cost still remains. By focusing on early intervention and increasing access to effective and individualized treatment at the school level, we believe that we can affect a positive outcome, not only for each child diagnosed, but also to society as a whole. Collaboration can be achieved ethically through developing a professional and respectful relationship from the beginning with other professionals, training through the use of research-supported methods such as video modeling and behavior skills training, And then when considering restrictive interventions such as restraints, the most important factor is to ensure staff members implementing the restraints are well-trained and that the restraint is part of a well-written behavior plan. As future BCBAs, we need to think about how we can change the culture and broaden our scope of practice to be more inclusive and beneficial for the population we serve. We can do this by making others aware of the facts and of the research. We need to lessen concerns of other stakeholders by educating them on restrictive interventions and by educating ourselves on how to work with other professionals and the concerns that they have about ABA. And we need to advocate for effective supervision and make learning how to collaborate with other professionals a priority in our training as future behavior analysts. Because as professionals in our field, we believe that even a little bit of ABA is better than no ABA.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening to our presentation today on the role of collaboration in the service delivery of ABA services. At this time, we'll be taking questions. Our first question is, what happens when there is a difference of ethical perspectives between disciplines? How do we resolve this?
So I can take this one. So we have to cooperate within the best interest of the client always. Whether we're hired by a third party, such as a school or not, we're ethically bound to do what's best for the client as per Code 2.04. Code 2.09C allows us to consider other treatment options. In those instances where more than one scientifically supported treatment has been established, additional factors may need to be considered in selecting interventions, including but not limited to efficiency and cost effectiveness, risks and side effects of the interventions, client preference, and practitioner experience and training. I would argue that the client stakeholder preference would weigh heavily here. Proactively, I think it's very important for us to outline our roles as a behavior analyst at the onset of a team approach to treatment. That way we avoid any misunderstandings down the road.
Thank you for that thoughtful response, Kelly. Our next question is, what is our obligation if someone wants to use a treatment or strategy that is not in line with our ethical code?
So I can take this one also. So we have an ethical responsibility to collaborate effectively and to be a part of a team and provide the best treatment package for the client as per Code 2.03b. However, we also have a responsibility to uphold the standards established in the ethics code. I think that first we need to analyze the potential level of harm to the client that the strategy may possess. Is it a harmless strategy that violates the code because it isn't evidence-based, or is there potential for significant harm to the client if it is used? If there's no significant potential harm for the client, we can try proposing similar but evidence-based strategies to make it more ethically sound and effective. If we're not implementing the strategy, for example, if it's implemented by OT or an IEP team, then we don't exactly have a right to demand that the strategy isn't used. This is when it's good to understand the philosophies of other members of the team, along with the team to understand our philosophies as behavior analysts.
Thank you again. We'll conclude our presentation with a full list of our sources for your reference. Thank you.